Hello, Yes But Why listeners. This is your host, Amy Jordan. Welcome to Yes But Why, episode 273, my conversation with improviser David Escobedo. But first, let's talk about our sponsors. Yes But Why podcast is sponsored by Audible. Sign up today for your 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/yesbutwhy. You get a free audiobook download as well as access to hundreds of books and podcasts. My guest David has a Harry Potter themed improv team called Mischief Managed Improv, so let's see Audible's selection of Harry Potter books. Here they are, all narrated by British actor Jim Dale. I should listen to those again. It's been years since I've spent time in that world. You should check it out too. Go now to audibletrial.com/yesbutwhy to sign up and get your account today. Yes But Why podcast is also brought to you by podcastcadet.com. Podcastcadet.com is the company that my husband Chris Jordan and I run to help podcasters. We want to help you start or improve your podcast, so just let us know what we can do. And don't forget to mention the code YBY20 and you'll get 20% off the first service or workshop you buy. We can't wait to meet you. Podcastcadet.com. Yes But Why podcast is also brought to you by True Hemp Science. True Hemp Science is the HC Universal Network's resource for vegan-friendly, whole plant extract CBD oil. Check out truehempscience.com to see all the CBD products available to you now. There are so many. Use code YesButWhy7 to get 7% off your order of $50 or more. You get all of the therapeutic goodness of CBD, plus you'll get a free packet of 2 yummy CBD edibles with your order. truehempscience.com. This week on Yes But Why, I talked to improviser David Escobedo about getting a PhD with a focus on improv. We chat about Neva Boyd, Viola Spolin, and the theory of play. We talk about celebrating improv teachers like David does with the Improv Boost. This one is definitely for the die-hard improvisers in my audience. I now present Yes But Why, episode 273, David Escobedo and getting a punk rock PhD in improv. Enjoy. I'm Amy Jordan, and this is Yes But Why podcast. Yeah. What kind of a creative kid were you? What did you do when you were a little kid that was your creative spark?
That's interesting. That's a great question because when I was younger, I grew up in a rural area of San Diego. So we were in like a lot of cow farms and avocado fields. And that being the case, like I didn't have a suburb like a lot of their kids might have, where they might have like neighborhood kids to play with. I think I had like one kid that was around my age that lived next to me. And so because we were kind of in a rural area and there was a lot of field, I was forced to entertain myself a lot. Not that my parents weren't attentive or loving or anything like that, but it was kind of just, and I think part of it is because I was so good at just like finding something to consume my time with. My parents really didn't worry about me, but I would literally tell myself stories. Like that's what I would do. And I would there's times that I'd be playing a game or I would just be watching TV or whatever, but in my mind, I was telling myself stories. And that might be kind of common with kids because human beings are like the only narrative animal in the world. We pass down cultures through stories. So it might have been me just processing what is the story, beginning, middle, and end. And what, I've been told stories. So what does that mean to me? Or how is that some sort of like playground for social norms kind of stuff? But I remember this, I used to get so enthralled in my stories that I'd have to like pull myself out, almost like a dreamlike state. And I wouldn't necessarily tell myself like all happy stories where I'm a superhero, or that even I was in the story. I would just be telling myself stories, and I would get so enthralled that I would like start crying because I was telling a story where a dog died and and maybe like that was the experimentation in my head of what a narrative is and how to like weave these elements together. But that was, and then on top of that, I was also like, I would put on puppet shows for my family. My poor parents saw me do so many puppet shows. I would do dance concerts, but I never did like acting. I would do, come see this puppet show and come see me dance to this song and everything. And I used to dress like Michael Jackson. Yes. And whenever the family came over, like aunts and uncles and everything, I would put on a little dance show for them. And this was not intended, but this is just something my parents discovered is we had one big room in the house where if you turned off all the lights and you turned on this one light, it was meant like as a spotlight for the fireplace or something like that. But my dad would just twist it so now it was in the center of the room and it looked like a spotlight for a stage. And I would dance in that spotlight. And at the time, I'm like, killing it. My family's loving this. They're watching me. I'm an amazing dancer. But the reality is, we have a bunch of aunts, uncles over drinking, and they don't really care. They're just there to talk to each other. And so I'm kind of like this, almost like Vegas used to have like the comedian up on the side as you're gambling and everything. I'm kind of like this just like stupid excuse to like drink and crack jokes. Woo! And like, and I think that if I went to a friend's house and their little kids like, come watch me dance. I'm like, I don't care. Let's go watch. I'm drinking. We're having a good time. Yay. It's like this positive like reason to come together. At the time, I thought I was just an amazing performer. But now that I look back on it, it was like just an excuse for the family to come together and drink everything, which I think is less common nowadays. There's that whole phrase of like, we only get together at weddings and funerals. And I think that's really true. And back in the day, we used to get together every weekend at another person's house and you could hash out issues. You could have a beef with a family member. And then 2 weeks later, because you've talked it over or they happen to be in the same room, we could have some sort of resolve instead of, I'm not talking to you ever again.
Yeah. I think the family unit is different now. Like the idea of who your family is different than it used to be. Because you're right. My family was like that too. And my mother-in-law is often discussing that, bemoaning the lack of that as well. The idea that people aren't like getting together, the whole family, like every weekend. And like, I remember that growing up, I also was performing in the middle of the room. And I would just like to back step 1 second to let you know that you probably were great. And also they loved it. And you will realize this when you have your own child is that like they can do any move. And you're like, look at that move. Do you see that? Like you love them and your aunts and uncles and your family just love the kid. The kids are, the beauty of little kids is that they're just great. And so them dancing, even if they're just moving one arm, you're like, that's the best arm movement I have ever seen. This is seriously like Soul Train right here. It's amazing. Like, so they did love it. And yeah, sure, they were going to get together anyway. But you were the entertainment. Number one, I feel like that's my whole life. And also, like, they loved it and you were super great. So I just wanted to be like, wait, before we switch topics, like, I just want you to know, like, you were great. You're a great dancer. Your dad gave you a spotlight. Like, that's true love right there. Like, I'm like, how can I give my child a spotlight now? Like, that's not like how I'm trying to, like, what can I do to create this? So like,
twisted the light.
Yeah. I mean, I'm into it. Go dad. Like you giving your kid a spotlight literally created this beautiful thing. Right. But yeah, I mean, when we get together with family, it's different than it used to be. Right. It used to be just your, related aunts and uncles and that. And now I feel like it's more like a friend situation. There's a lot of groups that develop over, or it's like friends, you just meet people through school or whatnot, or a shared interest. Or like, a support group or whatnot, right? You're all, like I got a mom's group. It's like just a bunch of people who like have children with preschoolers and we're all just like, what? But we're together. And so it's okay. So yeah, I mean, I think family means different things to different people and people are getting like, I don't know. I wonder if some of things that we haven't understood yet about our own childhood culture, will explain why the sort of
societal move has gone from just related groups hanging out together to this like interconnectedness of various families and people, and they are who consider each other a family. Because like, you know, that's one of the things about improv, about theater that I really love is the family aspect. Like, I've been part of various families. When you think about theaters, different scenes that you've gone. You grew up in San Diego, but you are currently in the UK. I'm going to assume from childhood rural San Diego to now getting your PhD in the UK, there were a number of different scenes along the way. What were your landmark artistic scenes, or like who are your people?
That is a good question. And you said a lot of stuff there, and I feel like there's so much stuff. That I want to respond to several of the things you said. So when you ask who are my people, that's kind of like what I'm studying, to be honest. That's a portion of what I'm studying, because you and I, before the podcast, started talking about culture. So when you're talking about, like, I think back in the day, families used to come together, and I've heard people say we've lost the art of conversation. Like, we only talk about stuff that interests us, and then we get on our phone when they say something else, kind of thing. But I think that's because back in the day, people were a little more spread out. Cities were not as common. And so your major sphere of influence was your family. And that was your culture, your familial culture. And then it became very important of, like, how do you communicate or manipulate your family to get your needs met? How do I get more food? Or how do I get the attention, the positive attention that I want? And I think what's happened is, as we've moved into larger cities or more condensed spaces with apartment high rises, but also with social media, Facebook on our phones and everything like that, is that our sphere of influence, where we get our needs met outside of our family, even at a very young age now, like people in 8th grade or people that are like 10 are like communicating with family or friends, and they might get food from their friends, or they might get food from their friends' parents, or whatever it is. So that community changes. And so you're asking me who's my people, and I think the definition of like culture is shared references and virtues. And it's funny because maybe throughout my timeline, there's certain milestones where I've like really resonated with certain people and everything like that. But I think nowadays it's social media and being locked down during the pandemic allows us to create our own circles. Like, instead of having to break into X improv company to feel like I belong to that improv company, I can now, on my own Facebook friends list or Discord server or whatever it is, talk to Lakshmi in India, talk to Jay in the Philippines, talk to you, talk to Jay Suko in LA. And now I have so many like-minded people in my sphere of influence that those are my quote-unquote people. That's my community culture. So I think that one of the things in this timeline that I've experienced is that we used to go to institutions. We used to go to Second City. We used to go to IO. And a lot of what they're selling was not improv skills. A lot of what they were selling was a sense of belonging. That if like in IO, there's this thing called there's this book called Whose Improv Is It Anyway by Amy Seaham. And it's a fantastic analysis of the history of improv. And she coins this phrase, subcultural capital. And what happened is, at IO, Sharna Halpern developed this thing called subcultural capital. And to break that word down, subcultural is like performance is a culture, but improv is a very small niche within that culture. So it's a subculture. It's like not just theater, it's not just mime, it's improv. And improv, especially at that time, was very, very small culture. And capital meant like things of value. And it doesn't have to be just like money. It could be like knowledge, or it could be a relationship to a person of influence kind of thing. So Sharna Halpern created this subcultural capital in improv that, if you take this class, you're one of only 10 people that get to work with Del Close. Or are you paying $300 for this special course because you get to learn the Herald? And so there's all these little, do you know the name for that edit? Because only people that took this class know this name for that edit. But that's not necessarily an improv skill. It's teaching the sense of you're part of the cool kids club. You're part of the elite. You're part of the clique that has these. Here's another thing that's really big in culture that has these shared references. We all have the same word for the same experience or concept. So I think that a lot of institutions used to do that. They used to focus on community, and what they were selling more than skills were belonging. People would advance through their 7-week course, and they weren't necessarily of a high skill level by the end of this entire course, but they felt like they belonged. And if they paid a little bit more, they could do a show. And if they paid a little bit more, they could do a workshop with this incoming teacher. And if they paid a little bit more, blah, blah, blah. So I think that we are moving away, especially because of the pandemic, away from this concept of, I feel like I almost belong to this institution. I feel like I almost belong in this community. And we're now going, I am good who I am. Like Brene Brown says, like, I'm braving the wilderness. I'm fine with who I am right now. Because there's this fantastic video if you have a chance to watch it. It's Will Hines and Matt Gethard, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. And Matt Gethard was in the movie Don't Think Twice, which was about improv. Will Hines is a fantastic human being, not just an improviser, but a human being. And they're talking, and they're both pretty established. Like Will Hines wrote the book, How to Be the Greatest Improviser on Earth. Matt Gethard was in a movie about improv with Keegan-Michael Key. And they both talk about in this very raw conversation how at Second City they felt like they didn't belong. How they felt like they were still kind of on the outskirts. And if that's how, and please forgive me for being honest, but I'm going to say this, if that's how 2 cisgender white males feel who are part of the dominant narrative in improv that are established and very successful, if that's how they feel in a major company, how would I have felt coming in? Mm-hmm. Even 3 years later, how could I have felt? So I think that I think a lot of improv is moving away from belonging to these groups and feeling like they belong to themselves or creating their own groups that other people can join, which I'm so for. And I kind of hope that's the way improv's going. But we'll see. As the regulations lift, it might go back to the way it was before. It might be just a little different, but we'll see as a lot.
I think that once international travel is more regular, like once the people who travel regularly can go back to traveling regularly, because there's a group I'm realizing only just because of being connected with the same group you're talking about, that there were maybe about 15 or 20 improvisers who were regularly traveling the world. And they are the strong connections between all the communities. So if you hook into one of them, you then get all these other groups, right? And you are connected, you meet this person or that person or whatever. And I feel like now that we've had this time online to chat with people, to connect about various topics, not even just improv, right? Largely food. And the idea being that we are now connected, I feel like once traveling is allowed, more of us are going to start traveling. More of us are going to be like, you know what? I'm going to do this, because it's not like I'm throwing myself into a random location with one connection where I'm like, hopefully this works out. At this point, if I want to go to Amsterdam, I just try to talk to everyone that runs each different theater. And then when I go, I'm like, great, I got 6 different people to go hang out with and work on this, do that, and I feel like that's going to be what gets us, what gets improv to become more of a connected artistic thing. And to speak to what you're talking about with reference to how the institutions aren't fulfilling us anymore, since we all essentially, I think that sense of belonging has broken a little, or rather opened up, I guess. We used to think we had a small space and that's where we were. I live in Austin. These are this is where I can go. Thankfully, Austin is a vibrant improv town and I don't know everyone in it. So I still have plenty of fun times for as many years as I'd like, meeting new people, doing new projects, if that's what I want to do. But then when we were all sent home, our social was this, right? Our social was online, or reaching out and being like, hey, do you want to look at each other's faces on the computer? Turns out we can do it. And then we do it, right? And that's fun. And we get to have this experience. But now it opens up who I can talk to and what I learn. And The best part about doing this podcast for me, like I mentioned to you before we started recording that like I'm doing this for new students who want to like learn about different paths in the world for doing theater, doing improv. But also like for me, like I just love learning about different ways that people look at it. Or like way back, you said that when you were a kid and you were telling stories to yourself, you would get like deeply emotional. And I didn't want to interrupt you because it was so beautiful what you were saying. But I just want to tell you like, same, like I did that too. Like I feel those deep emotions, like legit. Sometimes I watch certain television shows by myself because I know I'm going to cry. Like, I'm like, babe, can you just go work in the office for a little bit? I got to watch this show. And then I'm like, oh my God, because I feel things super deeply, right? And the nice thing about all of this is that we're connected to the world. We're realizing it's not just us. It's not just this small microcosm of Austin. It's not just the 2 or 3 groups of people that I've known doing theater as I've moved along, even though we have all felt like misfits. Turns out there's so many of us and we're all across the world and we're like interested in like deep feeling emotions and trying theater in different ways. And like we heard about improv and these people in Chicago doing it and also the like California crowd and whatnot. Yeah, interesting. But then everywhere all across the world took it and is doing it just slightly differently. And there's something super beautiful about talking to people and being like, so what happens, where you're at? And they tell me like how businesses work, how theaters work. Like you're talking about the institutions. That's the way the U.S. improv institutions work, right? I talk to some people in other countries. There are no institutions. There's like vague clubs that like meet in the back of a bar twice a month, right? Or there's nothing. I talk to some people in some towns and they're like, me and my friend Dan found a book in the library. Now me and Dan do theater and the old people at the old folks home watch us. And I'm like, best day. Like, and that's as much theater as anything else, right? But so how for you are you manifesting it, right? I've seen you online. I've seen that you've done a couple in person, right?
Yes, I'm excited about that.
How is it for you? How is the development of your creativity right now? Like, what are you doing?
That is a fantastic question, and it has like a huge long answer. And it has a long answer because of time, because we're definitely at a weird nexus where the regulations are starting to lift. So I have done stuff in person, but like 2 months ago, my answer would be very different, right?
Yeah.
I will say that the manifestation of improv is interesting. Because, and I can't take credit for this, someone who I highly respect, Joe Thompson, who runs Little Chicago Productions in Sheffield. It's called Little Chicago, even though it's not in Chicago, but it's in Sheffield, England, because he really likes the short film style. We had this conversation, and he shared with me that the concept of theater has become very westernized. So the concept of theater where you have the proscenium arch and the audience sits over there and there's an elevated stage and microform 3/4, that's a very westernized view of theater. And there's other cultures and other locations where it doesn't happen just on Friday nights at 8 o'clock. It's like a square where it's continuously going on. The audience surrounds it like in a theater in the round, like a circular venue. Maybe the audience actually intersects with the performance that is going on. And maybe it's casual. It's not like, I'll see you here at 8 o'clock. Make sure you dress nicely. Your call time is 7. It's more like, I'm just going to walk up to that stage and start talking. Like it. So this concept of what theater is very westernized, is very like UK, United States kind of defines what theater looks like. And then when we look at other performances, like even busking, we go, oh, that's not performing. That's not theater. But in fact, theater is okay. The reason it's important to talk about theater in respect to improv is because these characteristics of theater have heavily pervaded improv. I need to be on a stage. I need to have lights on me. There needs to be X number of people in the audience. Blah, 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 blah. And in fact, so I've been doing improv since 1994. I've been doing it for over 20 years. And what I've learned is that improv is like, it always struggles to survive. That's its history. That's its marker. It always takes risks. It always tries to be experimental. It always tries to do better. It's always been struggling. I can't remember what podcast I heard this on, but someone said there's that meme where there's a rose and it's dying because the pH balance of the soil is horrible and I'm not getting watered enough and the sun is a little too intense. Oh my gosh, not enough sun. And the rose needs all these different like parameters in order to flourish. And then the other side of the meme is a daffodil. And the daffodil's growing through the crack in the sidewalk. And it's like, fuck yeah, concrete! Like, it doesn't care. It's just going to grow. And improv is like that daffodil. Like, as much as you want to shut down improv, or as much as like these institutions try to be gatekeepers to be like, here's how you do improv. Here's what sophisticated improv looks like. The reality is improv will grow wherever it wants to grow. Like, you even told me an example where the two guys found a book and they're performing with people and the senior citizens. So that's improv. Like, that is just as credible improv as some major theater in London's doing improv.
100%.
Because they're affecting people. And what I think is they're representing their culture. They may not think they're representing their culture, but they are definitely regionally and reflecting the values of the people within their city and their group. Like, so I think that is really valuable improv. So improv has always been a struggle. Like, we look back on like you interviewed Jay Suko. I listened to that episode. I'm a huge fan of Jay Suko. We kind of look back on improv like Second City in Iowa with these rose-colored lenses going, oh, imagine how amazing that is to be there at that time. And I could have met these amazing names in improv and da-da-da. But really to have existed in that time sucked. Like, people were struggling to get audience members. People like Jay Suko told me how he'd have to go to like the surrounding taco shops and say, come in, we'll buy you a drink, we'll buy your food right now if you come in right now. Someone, I think it was Jay Suko, it might have been Sean Landry who told me that backstage, their restroom for the actors was just a bucket. So if you had to pee, it was kind of okay. But if you had to do number two, you had to empty that bucket or hold it for the rest of the night. But like struggling to get audiences, I think we have this glorified view of like the perfect improv show. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Do the improv that makes you happy, that makes you connect to your teammates. That's improv. And so I think we many times are like waiting for the perfect elements. I'm waiting till I can get a stage. I'm waiting till I can get these 6 players together that I like and da-da-da. And it's more important just to do it. Because like improv, as many books as we read, as many, unfortunately, podcasts we listen to, as many classes as we take, you never learn as much as just doing it on stage with friends. Or not even on stage, just doing it in a room with no audience members. Like, that is where improv grows. And improv has always been a struggle. As much as like I might have an improv team and I'm like, oh, there's only 5 people in the audience. It's always been that way. Always been that way. Which is, gosh, I realize I've been talking a lot, but like, which is one of the reasons why I am pursuing my PhD in improv, is that a lot of times there's this narrative in the improv world of this is how you succeed at improv. You start by taking classes, and then you coach a team, and then you teach a class, and then you teach a course, and then you're an artistic director of a theater. Congratulations, you're winning at improv. That's not really it. That's a capitalist view of looking at winning at improv, because now it depends on how much money you can make from improv that determines your success. That's the capitalist view. And people's arcs or journeys in improv could be a manifold of different things. I'm not running a theater. I'm getting a PhD in improv, which is very academic, which is almost very counter to improv. And then there's people that run social medias that are just improv related, or run blah, 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 it's improv related. Like, it's not one journey in improv. It's how you intersect with the art of improv that really defines a good experience in improv.
I think the interesting thing to note about that as well is that we are all building our own journeys, and that, you know, they're selling us a bill of sale to tell us that there's one journey that we should all do.
Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
Enjoy what's going on with you. If you want something different in your own life, find it. Like again, to harken back to my example of the 2 guys in the book, how punk rock is it to find a book and create their own performance based on just, we read one thing, it inspired us so much that we decided to do this thing. Like, that effort is what keeps us going forward. You know what I mean? So I want to switch this a little bit because I want to hear a little bit more about your PhD. And like, how do you get to the point where you're sort of studying culture and, you know, yes, we are involved in improv. Yes, we are involved in theater. And as we've established, like, we all have different journeys. Honor your journey. Have a good time on your journey, right? Whatever it is, we think it's important. So you can think it's important too, right? Have confidence in your own journey. But like for yours, David, what led you to, I like doing this theater stuff. I like performing. I don't like the path they've given me that says, you know, take a class, become a teacher, artistic director. Now you win. But now you're studying it. What inspired you to get into that path?
Again, that's a fantastic question. It has tons of luggage behind it. So in the history of improv, like there has been gatekeeping to improv, meaning that there's only certain people that have the opportunity for stage time. If you try to be a part of a larger company, then there's only certain people that got opportunity to stage time. And there's a disproportion. Maybe 4 or 5 people got to be on teams while one person did not get to be on any teams, or to teach classes. And I think it's really important that that when we talk about, you know, improv is for everybody, and we talk about inclusion in improv, that it's not just about like students are inclusive. We want diversity in our students. We need diversity in the leadership and the people contributing their voice to improv. Instead of just saying like, we like the idea of inclusion because we get to sell more tickets to our classes and more audience members in the show. We want to say, I want to hear your voice on stage, and I want to hear how improv works for you. Like as a teacher, you teach students, you tell others. That's what passing on culture ultimately is like, let me tell you how this works for me, or how this, you know, that teaching is culture, because they say teaching is also colonization. So if I come in, if I'm, oh my gosh, I might have gone off on a huge tangent here. So for example, I moved to England, and if I move to England and there's someone doing an improv company here and they're doing it the English way, which for the sake of this metaphor, we'll say Keith Johnstone. Keith Johnstone's status, theater sports, it's a little different than UCB game. It's a little different than IO relationship, right? So if I come in and I start teaching students like, oh, this is how improv works for me, I'm literally colonizing the area, because I'm saying, oh, the affluent members in improv are Del Close. The affluent people in improv are Viola Spolin. These people are American. They're not United Kingdom. So I'm coming to another person's country and telling you who important people are. I'm also saying, here's the values of improv. We say yes and, we accept the offer, da-da-da. And those concepts are now colonizing the area that I'm in. So education is a form of colonization. Okay, so let's fast forward to why I am taking the route I am. So if we look at it that way about sharing culture, then we can also, unfortunately in history of improv, it has been predominated by white, cisgender, heterosexual male. So the short form, long form improv that I practice arguably began in Chicago with Neva Boyd. Actually, it began in Chicago with Jane Addams and Ellen Gates Starr. Now, Jane Addams is an amazing figure in improv, and we don't hear about her. She was a co-founder of the NAACP. She was a co-founder of the ACLU. She was part of the Women's Rights to Votes. And her and Ellen Gates Starr, a lesbian couple, you don't hear about that because academia was dominated by white males. They didn't want to talk about LGBTQI. They didn't want to talk about women's contribution. But it was they came in and they wanted to have affluent people with money, contribute to the more impoverished neighborhoods of Chicago. They basically invent social welfare because it helps the whole city if we raise each other up. Of course, this was going around the world, but like they were one of the people that was just doing it, not knowing what they were doing, but they were just doing it because it was good. It was good for everyone. So then they hired someone, and they wanted to get the University of Chicago in on the act. So then they got Neva Boyd. Neva Boyd was new in this field. She wasn't new. The field was new. It was coming over from Germany, and it's called leisure studies, which a lot of us now know as recreation. And it was the study that sports and theater and like art creates community. We can look at it now and go, no, duh. But at that time, it was like, if you make a community sports league, like a baseball league, that means everyone on that team has to come together and talk. And that means that team needs to talk to another team, and they all talk. And then they go out for a drink afterwards, and then they have a good time. But that creates a community. And then every Friday night, everyone comes and watches those teams. Or a theater. Like if you have a community theater, it's like, okay, that cast needs to talk. The director needs to talk. You can have someone from outside the community come in, and now you have an external and an internal voice in the community. And then the audience comes. So that was the study of recreation. We think it's like, oh, just getting drunk on the beach, but it's actually a very valid study of like how to build a community. So Neva Boyd came in from the University of Chicago. Jane Addams and Ellen Gates Starr hired her, and she started teaching sports and theater and all this kind of stuff. And Neva Boyd's big thing was that when we play games, we play to the height of our ability. So if I'm playing tag, if I go, okay, you and I are going to play tag, and we start running, you are going to run your fastest. You are going to try to avoid getting dodged. You might actually hurt yourself trying so hard, but you're trying to the best of your abilities. So games allow us to play to the best of our abilities, which is why we call a lot of the exercises we do in improv games, because it removes that like judgment. It removes that, but we're still like having fun and we're playing to the best of our ability. So then Viola Spolin comes in. And Viola Spolin comes in, was a student of Neva Boyd, highly influenced her. And Viola Spolin, for the rest of her life, says her works have stayed with me for the rest of my life. This concept of games and everything. And Viola Spolin created these theater games. And what she would do was she would go out to the impoverished neighborhoods and she would pull kids off the street because they're not going to school. Their parents are just trying to make ends meet because they're poor and they don't speak the same language. And she would pull them off the street like, let's play games. But what she was really doing was creating community. What she was really doing was getting them to talk to each other. So they would play theater games, gibberish games. That's why a lot of short form games are guessing games, emotionally based, or gibberish games. That's why it started off with these immigrants, and she wanted to empower their voices. She didn't want to assimilate. She could teach them, here's English, look at this thing I wrote out, here, read this book. But she wanted to go, whatever you have inside of you, however you express your emotion. If I give you this guessing game, how do you express that? And she wanted to empower the voices that exist, not assimilate them to the dominant narrative. This is a very long story to talk about how improv began, not as performance, but to make community and as social work, to help people feel like they belong in the overall fabric of the United States, right? As opposed to, I'm different, so I should be quiet. It's like, no, I have something of value to contribute. So fast forward a few years, and it becomes only an activity that white males, heterosexual, cisgender people really excel in. Because in order to make it rehearsals, you probably don't have kids. In order to have, oh my gosh, this is a big deal, to have the confidence to speak your mind, you probably have always had the confidence to speak your mind and to label things in scenes. Whereas if you're part of a marginalized community and I make the reference of like rocks and beans, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But if I make this very dominant narrative thing of like, let's talk about Star Wars, oh, you kind of know what I'm talking about then. At least that's an immediate shared reference. So improv became this huge like boys network, because also at the time it became rather toxic for women in improv because you get a lot of men and they can sexually harass women and in the green room can say some horrible things. Unfortunately, it still happens, but at that time it was horrible. And quote unquote, Del Close said women couldn't be funny. He said he respected Sharna and she was the only woman he's ever had a healthy relationship with. And that was one of the leaders at the time, Del Close, saying that women couldn't be funny. And then you also have the issue of, even though it began with immigrants and with children and people and everyone contributing their voice to the performance, the minute a black person was on stage, they only played black characters. It's not that they wanted to. It's that the audience and their teammates could see them as nothing but a black character. So you had those harmful stereotypes. Whereas a white male could walk on stage and they could be an astronaut. They could be a cowboy. They could be, they could be everything. But if you're representative of, especially that striking of a community, you only become that. In women experiences, like, oh, you're a mother, a sister, or a girlfriend. Your identity is in proximity to how you relate to men. So it became dominated by white males. That's why, and if you're all of you listening to this podcast, if you look at influential improv teachers, I want you to see what percentage of those teachers from the past are white males. 80 to 90% of them are white males. And we need to change that because like I talked about education as colonization, we don't talk about Jane Addams. We don't talk about Neva Boyd. You know who we don't talk about? Elaine May. Elaine May coached like the first improv team, and she was on Broadway doing improv on Broadway. She paid for Del Close. Del Close would never have survived with Elaine May. You know who else we don't talk about? Jo Forsberg, the first improv teacher. She ran the first improv workshop. We don't talk about her. One of the reasons we don't talk about her is this dominant narrative of the white male. But another reason we don't talk about it is this packaging of improv, because you even talked about this a little bit. But this packaging of improv. If I'm selling improv, I have to be able to sell you a product. You come to my school and I can teach you the Herald. That's easy to package. I'll teach you game. Like you used to be, we're going to teach you how to play game in scenes. That's a package. But to really benefit from an improv teacher's training is if I just go, you need to come in my class, I'll see where you're at specifically, and I can tune my exercises, my notations to where you need to be with the best of my abilities. But institutions can become about packaging and becoming a machinery, like a meat grinder. So people go in one end and come out the other end and have a unified experience. They all have access to the same information. I forgot what your question was. I got off on such a soapbox.
Right now, you're telling me about the history of improv and the people that we all need to know that nobody talks about, and I appreciate that. But this started with a question asking you why you got into your academic journey of studying it. Clearly, you are super into it, and that in and of itself sort of answered the question. But like, you were in this machine you were talking about, this improv machine of like, you got to do it this way. This is what's going on. You took some classes, but you know, I'm going to say only very recently has the culture of improv allowed for knowing all of these things and having teachers and looking at courses in a different way, less as let's go hang with a celebrity and more like I'd like to learn this skill or this skill from this person, right? But so you're in the study of it. How did you getting a PhD isn't like a 10-month situation. You've clearly did a deep dive in the education of this. Why did you choose that as your path?
Because thank you for reiterating. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Because improv at its beginning, but also I think at its greatest benefit is making people come together and connecting. Like you even hear this in all the major institutions, is connect with your scene partner. You get all these things that are like just no-brainers for like, make eye contact. You do that when you're really connecting with someone. Listen. You do that when you're really connecting with someone. Say yes and to every little detail. Like, hello, all we're trying to get people to do is connect to each other and listen and not push their own agenda on stage. I'm not directing the scene. I'm contributing to the scene. And I'm creating an open space where others may contribute to the scene. And equally, there's that whole thing of don't come in with a house already built, bring a brick and together we'll build a cathedral. It's like bringing that little bit of information and we can build something beautiful. So I think we need to get away from this concept of like improv is about how loud the applause is at the end of your set. And we need to get closer to like the origin of improv, which is like, let me listen to other stories and let me find out more about other people. And because you didn't even talk about this, at the end of the night, maybe I'm like crying because I've heard your story. I've heard your story. You have been heard. There's this nurse. Oh, I should have brought them my quotes. Because I have a bunch of quotes from my research. But there's this nurse that says something along the lines of, the greatest human need is just to be heard. And it's like, I think that there's so much value in gosh, there's still another rabbit hole we can go down about just the concept of existence. One of the reasons that we like to belong to communities is because it emphasizes our virtues. And if our virtues are emphasized, if a group of people emphasizes our virtues, then it validates our existence. If we see a celebrity that reflects our virtues, we go, oh, see? That's the way the world is. And so that's why it's so powerful to have the sense of belonging and to be heard. Yeah. So that's improv. And then we can open a whole new can of worms and talk about how dominated by white males academia is. Talk about the gatekeeping. And one of the reasons why it's hard to find information on Joe Forstberg, but it's easy to find stuff on Del Close, is because academia has been dominated by the white male voice as well. Men make the discoveries and women are footnotes. And I historically, like I'm not saying currently now, if there's still a problem with it, but historically, it's like we only document the men that have made discoveries. We don't talk about all the women that's contributed to. Oh, random note: if you listen to "How Did This Movie Get Made?" It's a fantastic documentary. They do like Nightmare Before Christmas, and they do like Die Hard, and oh my God, every episode is fantastic. Every single episode. That whatever movie they're talking about would have collapsed, would have just never been made. And they're talking about Home Alone, unless there's a woman that saved it. Every single one of those movies, there's a woman's like, for 12 hours, I'm going to edit this. Hold on. Or this song was going nowhere, so I changed the song. we never heard of it. We heard Tim Burton as the director. We hear about Macaulay Culkin as the actor. We never hear about the women that saved those movies. And I think that we need, so I want to contribute to that fabric of, like, we need to talk about the BIPOC. We need to talk about the LGBTQI. We need to talk about the women that have contributed to improv, that have contributed to making the world a better place. And so that's partially why I'm going for my PhD.
So you got into it so you could be the storyteller to get this information out there, to do the research and put it in front of the, powers that be, to say, yes, hey, this is, plus also to get yourself to be PhD. So when you write something, people are like, hey, that's legit.
That does sound enticing, but it's not necessarily about me being a PhD.
It's not about you, though. It's about the system, like you mentioned, of academia. It's about the system of what we choose to believe is important. Even the mention of celebrities. Like, yes, celebrities are not actually better than us as human beings, but absolutely, they do things and we think, oh my God, look at how amazing they are, right? Like, for instance, there are celebrities doing podcasts like I'm doing, and more people listen to theirs purely because they're celebrities, right? They don't have, who knows if my conversations are better than theirs, but they get that attention. That's what's going on because that's the way we look at it. Is that consciously or unconsciously, I suppose, then, is that why you chose to get to the top of academia, so that when you tell these stories, you get the respect that you've always deserved with or without a PhD, but now you're like, I'm holding the sign that says I can talk now,
That's these are great questions because there's so much behind them. It's not about me again, because my thought is, academia is circular logic. One of the reasons there's been a problem with it being dominated by white males is that when I'm doing a paper, it's like, here's how you do improv. And my supervisors are like, well, who said that? It's like, I'm telling you because I do improv. They're like, you have to have a source citation. Not only do you have to have a source citation, you have multiple source citations. I go, okay, here's an interview I did with Amy. And Amy told me how to do improv. Here's an interview with Jade. I took a class with Rich Baker. I took a class with Craig Gakowski. And they're like, no, but those aren't academic journals. Cool. Okay, so I have to go look at academic journals. But because historically people have not researched improv, there are no academic journals, or in reality very few academic journals, that tell you how improv is currently being practiced. There's very few. And if there's anything, it's by white males, because historically that was the gatekeeper of academics. So it's like the circular logic is you have to take credible sources, which are our credible sources, academic journals. And so it's like, I want to contribute. I don't care about me voicing anything, but I want to add to that field of research where when the next person's trying to do improv, they can go, oh, here's a paper that says, here's how you do improv. Here's a paper that says, here's community in improv, blah, 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 blah. And so there's also there's no silver bullet. Like, what's the reason you're doing this? There's not one reason I'm doing this. It's like, I don't have a tagline like a movie. David Escobedo's doing this for this reason. But another reason...
Come on, man. I need a title of the episode. Seriously.
Another reason I'm doing this is that I would like to see improv have its own school, in the sense that its own master's program. Like, you go to UCLA and you can major in improv, or you can go to wherever. Or that I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see companies bring in improvisers to talk about community and culture and do these group games and everything. Or grade schools have a teacher who's an improv teacher and bring students together, like recreation. And one of the best ways to do that, to arm that HR person, to arm that person creating that module, is to go, look at this doctor said. And I hate that. They can't just look at the effect of it. They have to get an academic journal that said that, because academia, for some reason, has more credibility than the actual experience of it. But I think that helps arm people, and it will actually better empower the whole improv ecosystem to have these improv teachers as full-time positions at schools, as in businesses, large-scale businesses, that you can point at this article and go, look, this tells you the benefit of improv. Here it is right here. But it doesn't have to say, as enticing as it be, is oh, cool, then I'm on a pedestal. It's not really about me, because I'm very influenced by Jay Succo, that if I'm winning an award for improv, then I'm not doing my job right. because I'm not making my scene partner look good. I'm not making everyone else. I'm sorry, I'm about to cry because I'm really passionate about this. I'm not making the whole ecosystem better. So it's not really about me. It's about the world needs to heal. And this, I just think improv is such a good way.
I agree with you completely. I have said maybe 10 times on this podcast that improv could save the world. That like, if we could get like world leaders and like, I'm like, just let me into the Senate. Like I could get them talking in a week. Like I promise you, like just the idea of it, it's an opening. But you know, to bring it back to what I was saying at the beginning, potentially even before we recorded, the idea is I think that creative people have a breadth of emotion and experience that not everyone does. And that the nice thing about improv as a like therapeutic thing is that it helps people get to that point, or at least acknowledge the way other people do. For instance, to bring it back to the student that I had who was like, oh, I don't have any emotions. I was like, cool, you don't actually need them. But in the show that you're going to do, you're going to need to act like a person who has emotions, right? Because strong emotions, those are funny, right? So we need to establish the way you are going to communicate to these people that are in your troupe. The character that you're playing is angry, right? Are we going to throw our fists in the air? Are you going to stomp around? Doesn't matter which one you do, just make a decision and let us know this means anger, right? And then we can communicate with one another, right? Now, this idea of just communicating with your scene partners, just letting them know the way that you express yourself so that we can work together better is very theatrical and very hippy dippy. But good Lord, the world would be quite helpful if, I mean, you could do marriage counseling with this kind of stuff. Like, wait, so you're telling me that like furrowed brows does not mean that you're upset? I don't understand. Well, what does upset mean? Oh, shoulders up. That's what that. Oh, okay. Like legitimately the human interaction, because again, to go back to this idea that everyone says this is the one way you do it. And there isn't a one way you do anything, right? There isn't one way to express happiness, to express sadness, to express anger. So human relationships are misreading each other, right? Or we get filled with one emotion and it distracts. There's a few distracting emotions. Anger's one, romance is another. These are things that like cloud what you're really talking about, right? So to bring it to the idea of doing improv for the Senate, right? They get angry. So they get puffed up. There's a cloud now. They can't see you. They can no longer read what you're trying to tell them because they got that cloud in front of them. They can't do it. But if we could get improv in there, that would be wonderful. And, so I'm totally 100% down with the vibe of what you're saying and how we do need it out there. I want you to know that I didn't mean to imply when I was asking you if you got a PhD so you could be top tier dude. If you were egotistical about it. Though I appreciate you talking about that because I think there's something about letting go of ego that's also an improv thing. But I love this idea and I'm down and I'm excited. I'm happy to be part of the machine that puts your information out there, which is to say that your efforts are to create this historical record, to create this breadth of information, yes, to get other people who are, to talk about improv so that we can use it, right? I think that some of the work that, like, say, Alan Alda has done with the doctors has been what's brought that into the medical field, right? I talked to a doctor a few episodes ago who's using improv to teach doctors in medical school, like certain styles of different ways to like get people's focus together, literally looking at physical cues on people, like we were talking about, like you walk into a room with the family. Okay. Physical cues help you to communicate, right? So all of these different ways in which we're using improv, I'm so glad that you are bringing it to sort of the academic high level, because you're right. The people who are making the decisions about what's cool and what's the right thing to do need all this backup, right? It's not human experience. It's a book written by a dude. And you're like, but he said it, so it's gonna be.
Yeah.
I mean.
Another thing that I've realized through researching this is that a lot of what we would consider improv books are actually just advertising material. So a lot of like Truth and Comedy or Second City, behind the backstage behind Second City, as much as we think these are like historical or like the Compass Players or like Process, like as much as we think these are like, oh, these are just books about the art form, many of them are just advertising so you go to that school. Many of them are like, look at all the successful people that graduated from here. So you're like, oh, wow, I really want to go to that school. And they're not factual, but we uphold them just because there's so little literature on it. We uphold them as factual and improv, and they're just propaganda, really. But and so that's why I would like to add more to like this less biased material and just go, here's Elaine May was amazing. The Sirens, like the first all-female improv team was amazing. Sean Landry, Jane Morris, like there's so many people that contributed to it, not just the people that happen to be teaching at this one school.
And then, so for you, because we're right at the end of the time that we can chat here, so I want to ask you one final question. What is it that you are doing right now to creatively fulfill yourself? You clearly have a lot of things on your plate with your baby about to be born, with your PhD actively being worked on, with like already getting out in the world to teach in-person improv classes. What is creatively exciting you? What keeps the fires burning?
Again, that's a fantastic question. Like you ask these questions that are like really full of so much stuff. So part of it is when you research something, it sucks the fun out of it. It's like you start doing it, you're like, oh, I'm going to do this, and does that represent my community? Or when I listen to this person, did I reject that, and is that person going to be less likely to share their culture on stage? And you start hyper analyzing things, and then you start thinking about like, oh, am I making the right move, or blah 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 blah. And that's not why I got into improv. Like none of us got into improv to manage a theater. Like none of us got into improv because we like making sure there's toilet paper in the bathroom. Like none of us like I like to schedule rehearsals. We love improv because of the act of improvising. Whether that, it's like, I don't want to sell tickets. I don't want to promote my next show. I want to just do improv. So I have a couple events lined up where I just invited a couple friends over, and this sounds so stupid, but I invited some friends over, and we're just going to do improv. I'm not promoting it on the Improv Boost. I'm not telling anybody about it. I'm not selling. There's going to be no audience. We're not selling tickets. We're not worried about what our team name is. Are we all going to wear the same uniform? We're just literally going to get together and do 3 or 4 sets. And I know that sounds kind of like people like, oh, because people want that validation from the audience or that laugh. You know, they go, I could never do that, whatever. But I need to get back to, why did I start doing it in the first place? Because it was creative and it connected to people. And there's so many fantastic moments I've had in an improv rehearsal that no one's seen except for that team. And that doesn't mean that does not have value in my life. So what's really fulfilling me creatively is I have 2 or 3 events where I'm just going to go meet people. We're going to just do some improv. And I'm not worried about teaching them improv. I'm not worried about getting better. I'm just going to make moves on stage and support someone. And they're going to support me. And we're not going to sell tickets. No one's ever going to see this. And and I'm not going to worry about my PhD and what's the right way to do it. And am I using silence correctly? Like, I'm just going to do improv. Because when the first week I ever did improv, I just did improv. No matter how wrong it was, no matter how incorrect it was, I just did improv and I loved it. So I'm excited about just doing improv.
Yeah, me too. I just found out that the theater that I guess would be my home theater here in Austin started doing jams again. And I was like, oh, I can go. I'm coming, you guys. I actually sent them a message and I was like, hey, I'm super old, so I'm gonna miss the announcement. Can somebody text me? And they're like, yes. I was like, listen, I can't keep up with the interwebs, you guys. I try. But, man, that improv jam sounds nice. I am also excited about it. There is something about going back to the first reason why you did improv, the social, the like connectedness, the like just, hey, I don't know that many people in this town. Maybe I could meet some new people who are like-minded. Like, it has been a tough situation, this lockdown, this pandemic, this, even larger for us in a theatrical sense, the breakdown of what theater is, how it's run, because there's been so much time when it's been closed that now we're all examining. We're like, well, what are we going to do? Turns out we can look into business practices and da da da. And, you know, even like watching some of these big name theaters you're talking about crumble financially under the weight of this situation, I'm like, whoa, what are we to learn? What is the business lesson? You know, and I've talked to a few people about it where I'm like, what can we learn about the best way to run theaters? Do I want to run a theater in my life again? No, I do not. Thank you so much for asking. No, I don't, right? I have done that. I have filled that toilet paper. That like hit me in the heart when you said nobody wants to. And I was like, I did it for so long. And I don't want to fill the toilet paper anymore. I don't want someone to ask me and be like, oh, she's the one you need to tell about the toilet paper. No. But I am very fascinated to do that research and find out which theaters did well and which theaters did not during this time, to find out maybe what's the better business practice for running a theater. Like, how were you able to tread water? Are you super lucky? Because there's that. There's like, okay, first there's luck. Then there's people who like had savings in the bank and like, you know, continued to apply for grants or like discussed things with their business partners or whatever. You know, we're a nonprofit, so nonprofits can do whatever. They can repivot every minute if that's what they want to do. Whereas this one business says they do this, so they're going to do it. You know, different things to be learned, to be taken from that. But at the same time, like, I am so excited just to get back into the joy, the people, the connectedness that is improv, and like just connect with human beings again. Right.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a weird time to see these major institutions collapse.
Yeah, well,
because, oh God, we could go on a whole podcast about this, but I will just bring it back to my metaphor of like, improv's going to survive. Improv forces through the cracks, and we flower and we bloom, and we just go, we're here, yeah, awesome. Because all those institutions that closed, those teachers still exist. Those teachers still teach improv. And instead of going, I'm going to go to this school to learn improv, connect to that teacher you always want to take class. Email them. Hey, are you teaching classes? They would love to hear from you. They still want to make a living doing improv.
Yeah.
If there's a teacher you want to take a class with, message them. I would love to find out where you're teaching classes. And, oh, hell yeah, here's the next time I'm teaching classes. Or deconstruct the concept of a school. What's the concept of a school? It's not the building. It's not the course. It's just learning from someone else. So get 6 people together, all pitch in 1/6 of the cost, and hire someone to teach you for 3 or 4 weeks. I did that.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic experience. I got to learn from teachers I've always wanted to learn from in a group of peers that I love doing improv with. And we had a famous, amazing time. So do it that way. Like, look at teachers you want to perform. Don't look at the institution. Look at the roster. Who taught that? Oh, I always want to learn from that teacher. Email them. Message them. Oh, when are you teaching next? I want to take your class.
Right.
I'd love to hear.
Man, that's a great idea. It's like creating your own little camps. And that's amazing. Especially, guys, you know it. Some of us are good at scheduling. I am great at scheduling. I don't want to get toilet paper for you, but if you need to get a group of people together at any amount of time, I will get those people together. I'm good at that. And so the idea of this is like, yeah, there's got to be somebody in your crowd that was like the one who did all the scheduling. You call her and you say, babe, can you help me get these 6 people together and hire so-and-so? Because I think we can do it. But I just need your help because I don't know how calendars work. Right. And that's fine. I appreciate you. That's good. Right. We all have skills.
And those teachers have to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And they would love to teach a class of 6 people for 3 classes. They would love that.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I thank you, David, so much for being on the podcast. This has been such a fruitful conversation. You're right. We could literally talk for 8 more hours. And, you know, someday I'm just going to create an online show, which is just pop in and out of this Zoom to listen as David and I talk for 8 hours. But it's a 24-hour festival, but it's just us talking. Yes. And it's going to be great. It's going to be great. We're going to start doing really weird time ones because you're going to be up with a tiny child and you'll be like, are you awake? Yes, I am, because I'm on the other side of the world. Let's chat. What's going on? What is it, 2 a.m? How's that babe doing? Awake? Yeah, I got it. Oh, man. So fun. It's been so great to have you on the podcast. You are lovely. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you so much. I'm honored that you asked me, and I had such a fantastic time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Yes But Why Podcast. Check out all our episodes on yesbutwhypodcast.com or check out all the content on our network, HC Universal, at hcuniversalnetwork.com.